Hello everyone. Now you will hear a brief retelling of the movie What Every French Woman Wants. Enjoy the movie. He makes an effort to look away, but his attention is pulled to the older woman's large chest during the ride. His mother and Aunt Marguerite greet him home outside the opulent estate. Ursula, one of the maids, assists the kid with his baggage and inquires whether he still remembers her following their 3-year separation. The boy responds positively. His father's friend Mr. Frank waves from the attic window. Roger is given a hearty hug by Berthe, his sister, as soon as they enter the home. Later on, Mrs. Mueller, who has just completed harvesting fruit, runs into the siblings while they are strolling about the farm. When her husband walks by, Berthe says hello to him. To the teen's surprise, Mrs. Mueller abruptly raises up her dress and discharges herself. Roger, walking alone, comes into Mr. Mueller in the midst of the forest, stuffing different flowers into his trousers and praying in front of a photo of his wife. The elder guy notices the noise made by the teen stepping on a twig. Roger bolts from the scene, tripping and falling to the ground in his haste. A few moments later, he follows the sound of surrounding chuckling. He was shocked to see Ursula engaged in carnal pleasures with one of the men serving on the estate, Adolphus. Roger runs away, humiliated, but the woman just smiles and says good morning when she spots the teenager peeking. The teenage girl looks attentively at the pretty maid Helene over dinner. When Mr. Frank inquires about Elisa's lover, the mother replies that he is a lieutenant in the army. She displays a photo of the pair to the guy, and when Berthe makes crude comments about it, she asks Governess Kate to put her daughter to bed. Roger excuses himself a few moments later, and when he gives his aunt a goodnight kiss, she declines to give him another one on her cheek. The teenager hears a sound coming from the hallway as he gets ready for bed that night. Upon closer inspection, he discovers Helene indulging in sexual relations with an unknown guy via an ajar door. Upon going back to his room, he discovers Berthe lying on his bed after pulling back the sheets. The girl claims she isn't tired and would want to talk to her brother more as she has been missing him a lot. She claims their mother said Marguerite's fear of men is the reason she stays chaste. The child replies that she believes Mr. Frank's weird behavior and lack of attractiveness are the reasons he and his aunt aren't together when Roger asks. Kate bursts in to chastise Berthe for getting out of bed. The girl hurries back to her room as a result. When the governess notices the teenager's rising sheets and attempts to remove the covers, Roger hides out of embarrassment. The siblings see the maids the following day as they wade into the river and dip their feet in the water. When Ursula and Helene question Mrs. Mueller about her husband, the senior citizen opens up to them about his ongoing issues in the bedroom. A few moments later, Ursula amuses the guys by flashing her nude behind while Adolphe and Valentine mock the women across the river. Roger notices this and is taken aback by what he sees. The remainder of the family meets their father and sister Elisa at the steps when they arrive later that day. Berthe and Roger examine their father's metal examples inside. The elder guy bemoans the slowdown in business, citing the lack of demand for military decorations in the event of a conflict. Adolphe and the maids are helping to haul goods up into the barn that afternoon when the guy notices Roger peering up Ursula's skirt and chucks hay at him in jest. Later, after sneaking to a crawl space above the confession booth, Berthe brings her brother to the chapel. She claims to have stumbled onto it by chance and has since spent several hours listening in. Roger remains behind to hear his Aunt Marguerite's confession to Father Gabriel after his sister leaves. He is shocked to learn that his aunt has been thinking improper things about Roger. The teenager is about to fall into the priest's confession when the ceiling falls away, stunning his aunt as he does so. Roland, Elisa's boyfriend, shows up later and sees Roger being punished. Berthe offers her brother a kiss goodnight after tending to his weeping. Soon he hears Ellen and the mysterious stranger having carnal pleasures in the hallway again. He also notices Mr. Frank observing the maid next to a cupboard. Subsequently, he meets Ursula, who shares his ignorance of Helene's mysterious lover. Roger observes Mr. Frank uses his telescope in the attic after heading there. A guy looks through a telescope at a couple doing something on the grass outside after the man excuses himself. Then, just as Mr. Frank is about to return, he spots a book on his table and puts it in his pocket. When Roger asks the guy if he remembers being irritated as a teenager, he replies that he does occasionally still feel that way. The teenager sneaks a peep at his parents' bedroom on the way back. Roger promises the man he'll comply with his requests once Roland discovers him and threatens to tell his parents what he has done. Roland tells the teenager to wash his car the next day. Elisa soon follows, and as soon as the officer climbs on to give her a kiss, Roger puts the bucket of water beneath him, causing him to trip and collapse. Later on in the day, the teenager hides in the chicken coop and takes out Mr. Frank's collection of writings and pictures from adulthood. Adolphe bursts in to start spreading hay around the floor. Then Helene comes to feed the hens via the glass. As the man gets closer, he closes the window unexpectedly, trapping her within the little aperture. Helene pleads with Roger for assistance, but as soon as Adolphe approaches her from the outside, she decides against it. When the teenager comes out of the coop, she notices the maid's nude behind. When he gets back home, he replaces Elisa's book with Mr. Frank's adult novel while she is preoccupied. Then he makes fun of Roland's shoes, which makes the guy inform his mother that he was watching them in bed last night. Roger's mother tells him to go out of the room, but he pauses in the corner to make sure his sister gets the book. He later sees Elisa reading the adult book behind a tree. Ursula gets distracted in the kitchen by the teen as she is removing food from the oven when she is surprised. In response, the startled woman smashes a dish over his head. She cares to his wound after realizing it's Roger, all the while provocatively rubbing her body up against his face. The two are abruptly interrupted by the entrance of another maid. Roger, intent on becoming a man at last, follows Mrs. Mueller upstairs to the chapel's second story. She tells her spouse to stop praying at the altar by peering out the little window. Abruptly, the teenager walks into the room and starts improperly caressing the elder woman. The woman orders him to stop at first, but after a while she lifts her skirt to give him encouragement. They are interrupted by an outside messenger, and the woman quickly leaves the room. The envoy from outside tells the workers that France is at war with Germany. In the meantime, the wealthy family in the house rejoices at the news of the war since it indicates that military medals would soon be much sought for. The male employees of the villa make the most of their final night by meeting up with the female employees that evening. Roger is disappointed to see that everyone else has coupled up as he attempts to join in on the fun. Berthe and her mother witness Elisa say goodbye to Roland the next day. Simultaneously, the women employees go with the men in the horse-drawn carriage as they leave the villa. The girls each throw the teenager sly glances as they head back. Subsequently, Ursula requests Roger's assistance in moving a mattress upstairs. He approaches the woman in the bedroom, and she finds the novice teen's advances amusing. Eventually, the woman closes the door, undresses in front of Roger, and they start doing something. Following the act, the thrilled teenager declares his love for Ursula and makes a marriage proposal. Since it's his first time sleeping with a woman, the lady recognizes he simply conveyed the feeling, and she chuckles lightly. Berthe concludes that her brother has just completed the deed after noticing her brother's ripped shirt a few minutes later. Then she tells her brother that their mother is talking to Father Gabriel right now. They therefore make their way to the living room to listen in on the discussion. The priest counsels the mother, especially in this war-torn period, to just be present and receptive to her husband's approval when she talks to him about their issues in the bedroom. The mom chastises her kids for listening in after she hears them laughing out of the blue. Roger shocks Kate by showing up in the water when she is brushing her hair beside the river later on. She responds that she doesn't feel in danger now that the men have departed for war when he asks why she never used to sit by the river. Admittedly, the teenager says he's always thought she was pretty. He then emerges from the water and shows off his lack of clothing. The governess is then playfully splashed with water by him, and they soon start doing enjoyable things together. After downing a third jet a few days later, Elisa hurries to tell her family that Roland created the paper. Elisa notes that her lover is wearing one of her father's medals in the photo as the grown-ups ogle the war hero's valor. Kate and Marguerite sneak into the parents' bedroom that evening. Roger arrives moments later, but not before the brash teenager opens the door and perches on the chair to observe his parents. In the game, the father acts like he's going to do something to this woman. When the guy eventually notices his kid, the teenager exits the room, leaving his parents stunned and ashamed. When Marguerite comes to her bedroom a few minutes later, she is shocked to see her nephew seated on her bed. She offers him a peck on the cheek when he asks for a goodnight kiss. The surprised lady threatens to call his mother if the kid doesn't leave after he makes it clear that he wants a kiss similar to the one she gave him when he was a child. He claims to sense approaching footsteps as he prepares to depart. When the aunt finds out who the visitor is, she discovers that Mr. Frank has come to recite to her a poem he had written just for her. Roger grabs her hand and walks her back to the bed while the oblivious guy recites the poem declaring his love for Marguerite. Just before the lady engages in a gratifying deed, he rotates the Mother Mary statue so that it faces the wall. Mr. Frank hears sounds coming from within the room behind the door. Roger notices that Mr. Frank has just gotten a package the next day. He decides to follow the man to the attic where he is looking through a wooden box that contains adult photos. When the teenager asks the guy why he doesn't just sleep with actual ladies, Mr. Frank says that only someone like Roger can accomplish such a feat. That evening, the teenager beckons Helene into his room as she's walking down the corridor. Knowing that it's not his father or Mr. Frank, he asks the maid who she believes the mysterious man making out with her in the hallway is. Ellen says that she thought it was Mr. Mueller, but the teenager points out that Mrs. Mueller has stated that her husband is no longer allowed to have any kind of relationship with her. Roger stops the maid outside the doorway as she's ready to depart and gives her a passionate kiss, reminiscent of her past relationship with her mysterious boyfriend. Baird asks her brother the following day if he completed the act with the governess, and he confirms. She acknowledges that she was informed Roger had done it with all of them by Kate and the maids. When asked by the girl if he was doing something with Marguerite, he replies that they didn't follow through. The teenager then follows Elisa into the stables as she rides by on her horse. Roger offers to take her shoes off her hurting feet while the woman is brushing her horse. But the adolescent starts inappropriately groping the woman. They hear Mrs. Mueller enters the stables as Elisa attempts to stop her brother. Eliza eventually gives in and engages in carnal pleasures with Roger while an older woman tends to a horse in the barn next to them. Bertha assumes that her brother has just finished doing something with the new man as she sees him walk out of the stable into the street. When the girl spots Elisa a few moments later, she understands what has occurred. In the evening, Ursula and Helene simultaneously sneak into Roger's room to attend to some business. The women leave the room after doing the act. When Ursula spots Kate, she tells the governess that she's required in Roger's room after seeing Marguerite head to the teen's chamber. The maid chooses to participate in the festivities as she is about to depart. When Ursula awakens the following morning, Roger, Kate, and Marguerite are still asleep on the bed. After the young man and Eliza do something a few days later, the woman says she might be pregnant and doesn't know what to do. She drags Roger behind a tree so Roland can't see them as a jet goes by. The family welcomes the combat hero as he lands the aircraft, and he joyfully tells them that he has been promoted to captain. A carriage filled with the men who work for the company after returning from battle passes by as they make their way back to the residence. Afterwards, Adolphe is suspended by his damaged leg to extended by the cleaners and workmen. The other maids rush to comfort the sobbing Mrs. Mueller as she tells them that her husband perished in the war. Ursula goes into Roger's room that evening to inform him that she is pregnant. He proposes that she wed Adolphe, but she declines because he is now disabled. She therefore thinks about marrying Valentine despite the fact that he is blind. The teenager begs her to bring him a bottle of red nail paint before she goes. Marguerite shows up to inform him that she is also pregnant after the maid departs. Roger then advises her to wed Mr. Frank, whom he views as a good man who is obviously in love with her. The teenager takes Ursula with him to Elisa's room when she soon returns with the red nail paint. There, he gives the maid the order to apply nail paint to his sister's bed linens. Elisa, who is enraged, orders Ursula to stop and takes the nail paint bottle away from her. Roger orders the maid to wait for him in his room while he talks to his sister in an attempt to calm the women down. Elise is instructed to find Roland and inform him that they must engage in carnal pleasures right now. Elisa then goes downstairs in an attempt to locate her lover. Roger goes back to his room and gets Marguerite, escorting her to the attic where she spends time with Mr. Frank. The teenager overhears Elisa persuading Roland in the stairwell that they can have a relationship before marriage since Father Gabriel has stated that it is okay to do so at a time of war. Roger then goes to ask Kate whether she is expecting a child in her room. He's relieved when she says no, meaning he's wrapped up all his unfinished business.